যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream, and I forgot to turn my other ring light on. Yeah, now it's nice. So thank you for joining the live stream. I'll do it very quickly today, so I won't be interacting with the live chat too much, because at 7:30 we are having the audience interaction with the Libertarian Party of India. And jitna gali dena chahe de do, no one's going to file an FIR against you. Jitna curious questions hai sab kar lo, jitna honest एक्टर के तौर पे भी अगर कुछ कंसर्न्स है कि अच्छा ये साउंड तो अच्छा करता है मगर रियलिटी में कैसा होगा, वो सब कंसर्न्स सब पूछ लो. विल ट्राई टू हैव मिस्टर सोशियोलॉजिस्ट ऑन एज वेल, बिकॉज ही हैज सम एग्रीमेंट्स एंड सम कंसर्न्स एज वेल. तो Mohit, we did one on USAID already, okay, and we will yes okay with Mr. Sociologist, right. That's exactly our plan. Thank you. We are doing it on tomorrow. This professor is coming who sent me this professor. What a weird experience I'm having with this channel. This is so funny, this is so interesting, and this feels such an honor. That's the story of today's live stream, that this professor watches our live streams and I didn't even know it. And then when we discussed Richard Eaton's paper, there he commented that see, I wrote this paper countering his views. So if you want, I can mail it to you. Then we are in contact now, and he's coming on our podcast tomorrow. Day after tomorrow we'll have Mr. Sociologist, and when we'll discuss USAID. And so the point is that Richard Eaton is of the opinion that there was not enough Brahmins in the Bengal Bangladesh region to even do that so-called oppression that supposedly caused people to convert to Islam. And the common view is that yes, there was so much oppression, therefore they converted to Islam. Richard Eaton is saying there were not enough Brahmins. And the other view is that there were so many Buddhists here, Buddhists who are not that into self-defense and stuff and not too prone to violence, therefore they lost the war and fell to Islam. Irfan Habib, Richard Eaton say that they were just casteless tribals. That was the majority of the population in this region, and they were the ones who got converted to Islam. They were not in the Chaturvarna fold to begin with. Okay, so let's start the paper now. I'll have to finish this by 7:30, क्योंकि 7:30 में तो लिबर्टेरियन पार्टी का ऑडियंस इंटरेक्शन है. ये पेपर खत्म करके अगर 7:30 तक कुछ टाइम बचता है तब थोड़ा ऑडियंस का लाइव चैट देख के थोड़ा इंटरेक्ट कर लेंगे. हाय ऋषि, हाय निनर, हाय परफेक्ट सेल, हाय मोहित, हाय अभय, हाय दीदी, परफेक्ट सेल, हाय. ओके, लेट्स स्टार्ट. हु इज कॉलिंग मी अप नाउ? ओके. So I'm wondering if he counters the view and says that there was a lot of Buddhism around. Let's see what he says. Let me put this on this screen. What a fun audience I have. JNU professors. Let me by the way, just, in order to boast a little, let me show you guys who this person is, okay? Wait. I'll show you his credentials first of all, because you may say you don't believe in credentialism, but a majority of the population does, and unknowingly I think everyone does. But your credentials might not be the conventional college degrees, but in some way or the other you always look for credentials. because that's how mimesis happens. Rene Girard, FTW. So see who this person is. JNU, School of Social Sciences, Center for Historical Studies, JNU. Residence number bhi de diya, what the fuck. This is his email. MA in History, JNU. I was a topper of the batch in the Ancient History section. MPhil and PhD in History, JNU. Areas of interest specialization: religion and society in ancient and early medieval India, archaeological history of Indian religions, economic history of ancient and early medieval India, history of Southeast Asia. Experience as a permanent faculty as assistant professor in the UGC pay scale in the PG department of history, 3 central universities. I have 17 years and 11 months of PG and teaching experience. I have taught MA, MPhil coursework and PhD coursework classes and supervised MPhil and PhD researchers. Holy shit. As legit gets in India. Awards and honors, international collaboration, consultancy, not much. Okay, these are some important books by him. Mystery Sociologist was saying he has read some of his books as well. And he was very excited to know that he watches our live streams and sent me his paper and commented on his own. Let's see what are his books. Archaeology of Religion in South Asia. Archaeology of Religion, okay? In South Asia, Buddhist, Brahminical, and Jain religious centers in Bihar and Bengal, 600 to 1200 AD, came out from Rutledge. Rethinking Bihar and Bengal, History, Culture, and Religion, also came out from Rutledge in 2021. Then Religion in Society, Social Dimensions of Buddhism, Hinduism, and Jainism in India, from Manohar Publishers. That's where I think that's a publication house who printed Dr. Shomode's first book as well. I'll have to ask him. My hunch is Dr. Shomode might have told him about our channel, because Dr. Shomode is also pass out from JNU, and this person studied in JNU and teaches in JNU. Maritime Southeast Asia, History, Culture, and Religion, also from Manohar Publishers. Monasteries, Shrines, and Society, Buddhist and Brahminical religious institutions in India in their socio-economic context, from 2011. Then, Social History of Indian Buddhism, New Researches. Then Studies in the History and Culture of Ancient Indian Buddhism. This is from 2022. Okay. Recent peer-reviewed journals, let's see. Major trends and perspectives in studies in the functional dimensions of Indian monastic Buddhism in the past 100 years. Brahminical temples, this is the paper we are going to discuss today. Brahminical temples, mathas, agraharas, and a Buddhist establishment in a marshy and forested periphery of 2 quote-unquote frontier states, early medieval Surma Valley, that is Sylhet and Kachar. Hey, where's our Abirzen? Abirzen, this pronunciation of Char, that's probably the British way of pronouncing it, right? What's the Bengali pronunciation of this name in Bangladesh? I can't figure out. Kachar district, I've heard of it, I think. What's the Bengali pronunciation? Circa 600 AD to 1100 AD. This came out on Religions of South Asia journal. Then cultic relationships between Buddhism and Brahminism in the quote-unquote last stronghold of Indian Buddhism. An analysis with particular reference to votive inscriptions on Brahminical sculptures donated to Buddhist religious centers in early medieval Magadha. Wow. Jain and Brahminical temples and political processes in a forested frontier of early medieval southwestern Bengal. A study of Purulia. Nice. Purulia is in Bengal, okay? There's a place called Ayodhya as well in Purulia, Ajodha Pahar. Merchants and their family members as donors of inscribed sculptures, in early medieval Bihar and Bengal. Vishnu temple and its social linkages in 11th to 12th century AD in Komilla, Bangladesh. Oh, so many papers. Okay, let's now start discussing his paper. Brahminical structures, mathas, agraharas. How can one download such papers? The ones he discusses can't be downloaded. Silver Blaze, ek to hai ke you can take a membership of what's that famous journal collection website? I forgot the name also. I used to get papers from there only. What's the name? Can anyone remember? There, even if you don't subscribe, you have access to at least 100 papers. Not at least, exactly 100 papers, up to 100 papers in 1 month. Okay, उससे ज़्यादा कहाँ पढ़ोगे वैसे भी. JSTOR, yes. JSTOR में subscription नहीं रहने से भी you can get 100 papers for free. And plus there are other ways to do it. The way some people used to download songs 10 years back, that way. And most papers are some way or the other available on some website. Okay, let's now start Sir's paper. His name is Dr. Birendra Prasad. I don't think he's Bengali. I'll have to ask him. These middle names and surnames work in Bengali as well. Okay, so Brahminical temples, mathas, agraharas, and a Buddhist establishment in a marshy and forested periphery of two quote-unquote frontier states in early medieval Surma Valley, Sylhet and Kachar. Birendra Prasad, Assistant Professor, Department of History, B.B. Ambedkar Central University, Vidya Vihar, Raebareli Road. This is from when he was writing this paper. Abstract. This article aims to understand the socio-economic and religious changes in early medieval Surma Valley and the role of Brahminical and Buddhist religious institutions in affecting them. This valley was the most forested and marshiest part of Bengal. It received very heavy rains and was under substantial tribal influence, right? At the beginning of the period under study, it was a peripheral part of two fringe states. By the 11th century CE, a local state evolved, resulting from centuries of agrarian expansion. Brahminical religious institutions played a very important role in effecting this transition. Well before the arrival of Islam in the eastern or northeasternmost sector of the Bengal Delta, local society had devised its own ways to tame the jungle, cope with fluvial volatility, and cultivate rice even in the marshy areas. These developments force us to question those historiographical methods which explain the Islamization of Eastern Bengal in terms of Islam being the religion of the plough and the harbinger of rice revolution in the region. He's countering that view. Brahminical temples are increasingly seen as complex institutions acting and reacting with other societal institutions, yes, influencing them and influenced by them, exactly. In the three important models of early medieval, that is 600 to 1200 AD, in the three important models of early medieval Indian economy and society, feudal and integrative segmentary political dimensions of temples have... Why are people calling me? Okay. In the three important models of early medieval Indian economy and society, feudal and integrative and segmentary political dimensions of temples have attracted significant attention from historians. Political factors, alliance with the political elites, and the degree and nature of patronage received by the temples from such elites are believed to be important in influencing the careers of temples. The integrative model of early medieval polity and economy emphasizes the quote-unquote heterogeneity of the geographical space, the cultural implications of socio-economic interactions between the forested space and cultivated space, and the roles of the temples in hastening the transition from Aranya to Janapada, creating a new resource base for a gradually centralizing state. An important paradigm shift is also discernible. A micro-study of the locale, where these temples were emerging and functioning, and spatial variations in their roles, which propels us to explore similar issues in other parts of early medieval India. In which kind of locale did these institutions emerge and function? With what social variables did they interact? Did their role remain the same through time? What were the results of these interactions? Keeping these issues in mind, we will attempt to understand the roles of Brahminical temples and mathas in the early medieval Surma Valley, corresponding to the colonial districts of Sylhet and Kachar. This valley was the most forested and most marshy part of Bengal, suffering from fluvial volatility. In the whole of early medieval Bengal, tribal influence was probably most pronounced here. What was the role of Brahminical institutions in negotiating the forested and marshy nature of the Surma Valley? How did they interact with the tribal cultures? What was the role of state patronage in this process? What was the overall result? As this study is concerned with the cultic and socio-economic dynamics of the area before the spread of Islam there, this will impinge upon theories of the Islamization of medieval Eastern Bengal. एक footnote पढ़ लेते हैं. The professor is writing, the Barak River originates in the northern hills of Manipur. After passing through Kachar in southeastern Assam, it enters into the Sylhet Valley, Sylhet district, at a place called Amal Sidh on the Indo-Bangladesh border. It bifurcates into the Surma and Kushiara rivers. The Surma, north branch of the Barak, and the Kushiara, southern branch of the Barak, almost encircle the district of Sylhet and meet the Meghna 300 kilometers downstream. In colonial times, the nomenclature Surma Valley was used to cover both Sylhet and Kachar districts. After the partition of India, Kachar and Karimganj districts in southern Assam are now called Barak Valley. Kachar district is in Assam, the Karimganj area. I see. I wonder what the pronunciation is. Okay. Eastern Bengal in general and the Surma Valley in particular are important for understanding religious dynamics in an area which provided the most fertile avenue for medieval Islamization in the vast landmass of South and Southeast Asia from the Sutlej to the Mekong. Islamization of this land has been so successful today that the Bengalis from the second largest ethnic group in the ranks of Islam after the Arabs, rendering Eastern Bengal an island of Muslim majority in a sea of Hinduism. This Islamization of Eastern Bengal has been most spectacular in the areas to the east of the Surma Meghna rivers. Recent American historical and anthropological scholarship has sought to explain this transformation in terms of environmental and associated socio-economic changes, arguing that Eastern Bengal in general and the districts of the active delta in particular were a kind of quote-unquote slowly opening frontier due to perennial fluvial volatility, impeding the growth of stable human settlements and prosperous agrarian economy before the arrival of Islam. Richard Eaton has explained the expansion of Islam in Eastern Bengal in terms of Islam being the harbinger of a quote-unquote rice revolution. Yes, that's the paper we discussed. His basic argument is that in much of Eastern Delta, rice agriculture and Islam were introduced simultaneously, as Eastern Bengal experienced a transition to settled agriculture at the time that Islam took hold among common folk. Before the introduction of plough agriculture by Islam in this area, the subsistence economy of Eastern Bengal was characterized by fishing, hunting, and gathering and slash and burn farming. Rural mosques made of thatch and wood and tied economically to the land and politically to the expanding Mughal state functioned as institutional nuclei for the integration of quote-unquote tribal communities practicing slash and burn agriculture into the Islamic great tradition. If Islam was the quote-unquote religion of the plough in Eastern Bengal in general, this character was most explicit in the tract from Sylhet to Chittagong. Hence, within Eastern Bengal, Islam had the greatest success here. Apparently, Eaton has built his model on the thesis of J. Ferguson, who back in 1863 noted that it was not till the Mahometan conquest in the 14th century that the delta, properly so called, became fit for extensive occupation. Ferguson's core thesis that the floodplains of Eastern Bengal could not be opened for regular human occupation before the Islamic conquest may sound surprising today, but he cannot be faulted for this, as he was writing in a period when practically nothing was known of the pre-Muslim history of Bengal. More surprising is its uncritical acceptance by Eaton. This article will contest this view through an analysis of the socio-economic and religious changes that took place in the early medieval Surma Valley, primarily using copperplate inscriptions, the Tipera copperplate of Samanta Lokanatha of 664 AD CE, the Kalapur copperplate of Samanta Marundanatha, second half of the 7th century CE, the Nidhanapur copperplate of Bhaskara Varman, which is in the first half of the 7th century CE, the Poschimbanga copperplate of Sri Chandra of the term Paschim. Oh, that's not Paschim Banga. Oh my god, that's Paschim Bhaga. Lol. The Paschim Bhaga copperplate of Sri Chandra of 930 CE, the Bhatera copperplate of Govinda Keshava Deva of 1049 CE, and the Bhatera copperplate of Ishana Deva, latter half of the 11th century or early 12th century. We shall try to see the socio-economic transformations taking place in this area in a span of some 500 years, circa 600 to 1100 CE, and the role of temples, mathas, and agraharas, which were the tax-free land granted to an individual Brahmin or a group of Brahmins in this process. This paper is going to be very interesting, especially because we are reading this as a counter to a paper we have already discussed, and at least I guess that's right then, because I'm not an academic and not a full-time historian. So this is going to be fun reading coming to know of a counterpoint here. This article is concerned with just one aspect of the socio-economic dynamics of the early medieval Surma Valley, which is the role of the Brahminical institutions in negotiating the marshy and forested landscape of this valley. This is not to deny the role of trade, as trade plays an important role in the process of secondary state formation. This could have been very significant in early medieval Samatata and Harikela. From the 7th century CE onwards, port cities of the western delta, Tamralipti, Shubhendu Adhikari's area, and Chandraketugarh, a place about 2 hours drive from Kolkata, began to decline due to diverse factors. There is no evidence that seafaring merchants used them from the 8th century CE onwards. An important consequence was the gradual shift of the maritime focus of the Bengal Delta southeastwards towards the Comilla-Chittagong coast. Eventually, the Comilla, Noakhali and Chittagong coastal plains emerged as one of the most active zones for long-distance maritime trade and commerce in the entire middle and lower Ganga Valley. During the early medieval period in this area, in contrast to the rest of Bengal, had a tradition of regular silver coinage. Coins were issued by the guilds of merchants also, particularly in the coastal plains of Chittagong and the adjoining portions of Comilla. Though the Surma Valley, as part of the monetized states of Samatata, Shomotot actually, that's the pronunciation in Bengali, Samatata and Harikela, could not have been immune to these developments. It appears on the whole to be peripheral in terms of finding of coins. But even these limited findings may indicate that the Surma Valley was a part of the Bay of Bengal interaction sphere, and this could have had significant implications for this area. This aspect of the history of the area may be explored by a more skilled hand in future. This article will concentrate on agrarian and cultic dynamics. The geographical background. In Spate and Learmont's classification of 1967, the lands to the east of the Surma and the Meghna, the Surma Valley, plains along the Meghna River, and the plains along the Chittagong coast form a separate physiogeographic subdivision within Bengal. This subdivision includes the Kachar districts of Assam, which is an extension of the Sylhet plains. In Bangladesh, it covers the modern districts of Sylhet, Comilla and Noakhali, and the coastal plains of Chittagong. The area to the east of the Surma Meghna forms a great embayment of lowland between the Shillong Plateau and the parallel ranges which extend from just east of Comilla to beyond the Burma border. The Meghna Surma embayment is perhaps the most amphibious part of Bengal during the monsoons. Due to high rainfall, interruption of the slopes of the Madhupur jungle down to the sea, and the ponding back of local waters by the main Brahmaputra Ganga current. Within this general pattern, a differentiation exists. The Sylhet district is certainly the most amphibious part, not only within this sub-region but practically within Bengal. Till the late 19th century CE, it was a kind of frontier within eastern Bengal, and the only outlet for agrarian expansion for this population-saturated region. Sylhet, the land of winding rivers, swamps and rice, is one of the marshiest districts of Bengal. Large swamps, locally known as haors, are one of the most important characteristics of the landscape. This district, consisting of the lower valley of the Barak or the Surma, is an open alluvial plain about 70 miles wide, surrounded by the Meghalaya hills in the north and the hills of Tripura in the south. In the west, it opens towards the delta of Lower Bengal. The greater part is a uniform plain, broken only by clusters of small sandy hillocks and intersected by a large number of rivers, watercourses and drainage channels. Annual rainfall is around 150 inches in eastern Sylhet, one of the highest in the whole of Bengal. It could have been higher during the early medieval phase when this area was more densely forested. High precipitation ensured a thick forest cover in the past and imparted a general amphibious look to the landscape for the greater part of the year. In the later 19th century, the torrents that poured down in cataracts from the hills during the rainy season, together with the heavy local rainfall, used to convert the entire surface into a boundless sea of water. During the monsoons, an immense area of the district goes underwater. The villages are strung along the banks of the rivers, avoiding the marshes that lie behind, or they are aligned to the edges of Tripura ridges. Villages tend to cluster on the levees of rivers or khals, which are khals meaning in Bengali abandoned river channels or small rivulets, because they provide the only strip of higher land in the entire district. During the rainy season, they look like pearls of islands surrounded by the sea-like haors. If Hunter's account gives a picture of a greatly marshy landscape in the late 19th century, the pattern before 1787 could have been even worse. The Kachar district is as marshy as Sylhet, if not more. It is more forested, receives higher rainfall, and is under greater tribal influence. This marshy character had great bearings on the historical evolution of the Surma Valley. That can be seen by comparing the historical experience of the valley with that of early medieval Bengal in general and early medieval Samatata in particular. In an important study of the political geography of early medieval Bengal, Morrison found that the Bengal Delta had at least four subregions: Virendra, covering the areas of North Bengal; Dhaka Faridpur, roughly the historical Vanga; Bhagirathi Hugli or Radha; and Sylhet Komila Chittagong, variously referred to as Samatata or Harikela. In the Virendra area, from the very beginning, land was transferred in favor of individuals, and always in small parcels. The same pattern was more or less visible in the Vanga Radha areas, but it was fundamentally different in the Sylhet Komila Chittagong sector, where land was always granted to institutions, Buddhist monasteries or Brahminical temples, or to a large group of Brahmins. Land grants were very large compared to other sectors of Bengal. Within this sector too, there were important variations. Land grants were larger in the Sylhet area than in Komilla or Chittagong, indicating that this area was under heavier forest cover. Thus, in the central, northern, and western sectors of Bengal, property relations were fully developed, and culturally, they were more or less integrated with the Middle Ganga Valley. In fact, they were the heartlands of Brahminical culture in the delta. Samatata Harikela had different orientations economically, politically, and even culturally. It had a relatively sparse population and lacked a long history of individual property rights. Hence, the land grants to institutions or large congregations of Brahmins. Within the delta, Buddhism had not attracted a major following anywhere except in the lands lying east of the Meghna, where it continued to receive benefactions in the 13th century. The land that now lies in the modern Sylhet, Komila, and Chittagong districts was the home of people with a culture different from those found elsewhere in the delta. It was this land that provided the most fertile avenue for Islamization in medieval Bengal. Okay, let's see now. So, which part of the land was most fertile for Islamization? The land that now lies in modern Sylhet, Komila, and Chittagong districts, which was the home of people with a culture different from those found elsewhere in the delta. So, yeah, in this matter, therefore, he is not really disputing Eton, I guess, because he's saying, as Irfan Habib also says, that casteless tribals or slaves who got converted to Islam. So casteism had nothing to do with conversion. That is, I think, being agreed upon by even Dr. Birendra Prasad, Richard Eaton, Irfan Habib. But Professor Prasad is countering Richard Eaton on the point that whether Islamization is what brought, let's say, some agriculture and economic factors to Bengal or not. Let's see. Morrison's study is greatly helpful in understanding some peculiarities of the land situated to the east of the Surma Meghna, that is, Samatata Harikela, vis-a-vis the rest of Bengal. But despite providing some macro generalizations, he has not undertaken a microanalysis of the historical and geographical heterogeneity of this tract. We accept his thesis that Samatata Harikela was a periphery within early medieval Bengal. But every periphery has its own core, peripheries and semi-peripheries. Exactly, yes. Wait, मेरा चश्मा थोड़ा परिष्कार करना पड़ेगा. Is परिष्कार a Sanskrit word? Just because I pronounce it in a Sanskrit way. हाँ, बहिष्कार होगा तो परिष्कार भी शायद हो सकता है. Who knows? We accept his thesis that Samatata Harikela was a periphery within early medieval Bengal. But remember this. This is very important. This is very interesting as well. Every periphery has its own core, and I think this operates, or this is true for every concept. Even metaphorically, everywhere you say there's a periphery, but every periphery will have its own core, its own peripheries and semi-peripheries. Think of the idea of little kings of Nicholas Dirks. Everyone pretending to be a king and having their own caste dynamics, which is why so many jatis. If the area that constitutes Komilla district today was the quote-unquote core area of various Samatata polities, The areas which constituted colonial Sylhet and Kachar districts appeared to be the ultimate frontier within Samatata Harikela. After decades of archaeological research and documentation, data from Sylhet is not impressive. We get the same impression from the votive inscriptions on the sculptures of early medieval Samatata Harikela and from numismatic sources. This peripherality of Sylhet district becomes sharper due to a poor settlement record in the neighboring Mymensingh district. Mymensingh district, most of which is located in the Madhupur jungle tract, an elevated Piedmont tract that resisted extensive human occupation till the late 19th century, has a very poor settlement record in terms of settlement sites as well as in terms of sculptural findings datable to the early medieval period. Mymensingh. Situations to the east of the Sylhet district in the Kachar district are even worse. Despite unmistakable evidence of early medieval penetration at places like Bhuvan Pahar, the larger part of this district remained tribal till the late medieval period. Right, when it witnessed a tribal state formation. Okay, see. The Surma Valley was subject to divergent political and cultural pulls, and it remained either under the control of the polities based in Kamrupa or Pragjyotisha, Brahmaputra Valley of Assam, or Samatata. Both states have been described as Pratyanta, frontier, Prottanto in Bengali. Yeah, we use this word even today, Prottanto Gramanchal. So the far off, remote villages. The Pratyanta states defeated by Gupta Emperor Samudragupta. The Surma Valley formed a peripheral portion of these kingdoms. At a later stage, it became a part of those kingdoms which had their core areas in the Chittagong coast, that is Harikela, and conquered this tract through the Komilla Noakhali area. For the larger part of its history, this valley remained under the control of the Komilla Noakhali based kingdoms. By the last phase of this period, it witnessed a local state formation as well. This is a short description of the locale, which is largely marshy, heavily forested, under substantial tribal influence. One of the peripheries within peripheral states where Brahminical temples and mathas emerged and functioned during the early medieval phase. We shall now trace the patterns of interaction between these institutions and other societal institutions in the context of the process of early medieval state formation, consolidation of its resource base and legitimation. Now, so Professor Prasad here is admitting that at one point these were just tribal lands. Now let's see if those tribal lands become Brahminical and therefore have a caste system of their own in order to escape from which they get to Islam. Rulers, temples, and the jungle. Brahminical temples and mathas on the agrarian frontiers of the Surma Valley. This is such tough work, man. Fusing history with geography seems such a mind-bogglingly tough job for me personally, because I can't stand geography for more than my brains can't bear geography for more than 10 minutes. Which is why reading Land of Seven Rivers first chapter or Nihar Ranjan Rai's Bangali Itihash has been so frustrating in the beginning portions of the book. It's all geography, because in the end geography always affects socioeconomic phenomena. No, so you'll have, if you really want to know about a culture or a place, its economic history, its economics, you'll have to get into the geography. But so I just have to power through the geography areas of such scholarship. An active alliance between the state and Brahminical religious institutions and the Brahmin community is discernible in the Nidhanapur copper plate of Bhaskara Varman of Kamrupa, 600 to 650 AD, found at Nidhanapur village, 17 miles southeast of Sylhet town. The original grant issued by Bhuti Varman, who lived from, I guess, or was a king from 518 to 542 CE. The great grandfather of Bhaskar Varman recorded the donation of a large tract of land, the Mayura Salmala Agrahara, to a congregation of Brahmins on the principle of Bhumi Chidra Nyaya, indicating the donation of a tract of land that was not under plough, where the donis had to initiate agricultural activities.
By the time of Bhaskar Varman, the original copper plate was lost, so the donated land became subject to taxation. He therefore renewed it. By this time, important socio-economic changes had taken place in the locality. The document shows the transitions taking place there in a space of some 100 years. It offers one of the earliest available records for fluvial volatility, its impact on the population of the Agrahara, and the attempt by this community to cope with this volatility. Impact on the population of the Agrahara and the attempt by this Agrahara community to cope with this volatility. Okay. The boundaries of donated land as mentioned in this copper plate. The boundaries of the land, donated land as mentioned in this copper plate reveal some interesting inferences. A big Jatali, okay, that's the name of a tree. Bignonia suavalens. I don't know how to pronounce this. Or Binonia. Yeah, Binonia suavalens. A big Jatali tree marked its northern boundary. Southern boundaries were demarcated by a big hewn fig tree. On the eastern side, it was bounded by the Kaushika River, and on the western side by Ganginika. Okay, bah. Beautiful Bengali name. The boundaries referred to elements of natural geography, and the donated tract was not bordered by a settled agrarian tract on any side. That indicates that the locality in which this Agrahara was created was originally in a forested tract and prone to forest growth. A large Brahminical settlement, including a temple, was planted by the state in this largely forested tract. The temple complex appears to be the single biggest landholder in this Agrahara, while the maximum share of a Brahmin in the donated land was 2 amsas or shares. The temple received 7. So listen to this. Maximum share of a Brahmin in the donated land was 2 amsas. The temple received 7 amsas, whose income was to be utilized for Bali, Satra, and Karu or Charu, I don't know, Caru. It is apparent that the temple was the nucleus around which this Agrahara settlement grew, obviously. Here we have a case of expansion of agrarian frontiers in a largely forested tract with the temple as nucleus of integration. This is the story of India forever. By the time this copper plate was renewed by Bhaskara Varman, important changes have taken place. Some potters settled in the northwestern side of the Agrahara. So a potter's pit is referred to as the northwestern boundary. The tank of Vyavahari, lawyer. Okay, so a lawyer is a Vyavahari. Khasoka formed the tank of Vyavahari or the lawyer Khasoka. Khashok, I don't know what's this. Khasoka formed the northeastern boundary. The distinctly non-Sanskritic name Khasoka, yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Where's this word coming from? May indicate a tribal background or substantial tribal influence, right? These words are now lost in Bengali. They were not really Bengali to begin with. Substantial tribal influence. This copper plate shows the interface between the Brahminical and non-Brahminical population of this area. A tribal community is being integrated into the Brahminical world, presumably through the network of the temple and the Agrahara, not through forced conversions, not through genocides, not through threats of genocides. A dialogue, a conversation, a debate, a persuasion, convincing of people. Some portions in the copper plate were probably not in the original issued by Bhuti Varmana. By the time of Bhaskara Varman, 2 rivers bordering the village, the Kaushik and Ganginika, have either dried up or shifted their course. The Kaushika shifted its course, giving rise to Char, Shol, okay, on the eastern side of the village, Char. The shift of the Ganginika created a Char on the western side. These riverine shifts created new situations requiring some new arrangement by the state. Hence, these lines were caused to be inserted by Bhaskara Varman. We are not sure of the exact time of formation of these chars. We may reasonably assume that the char of the Kaushika was earlier than that of the Ganginika, because the western boundary of the village formed by the char of Ganginika is referred to as Adhuna Sima Ganginika. Ganginika, which is the present boundary, that is the meaning, okay? Adhuna Sima Ganginika, yeah. Adhuna Shima Ganginika. That would be the Bengali Ucharan of this. So, which means Ganginika, which is the present boundary. We don't find the use of this term in the case of the char of the Kaushika. It is also apparent that the char of the Kaushika was larger in area. By the time of Bhaskara Varman, this char seems to have become productive, so some sections in the village were probably eager to take a share in the land increased by the drying up of the river. That created a dispute in the village, which was adjudicated by inserting a new passage in the copper plate. The produce of the land that is increased by the Kaushika will go to the Brahmins, the Donis of the grant, but the land which is enlarged by the Ganginika shall be equally divided by the Brahmins as recorded. Finally, this copper plate provides another important inference, which is the population of this area suffered from fluvial volatility, but it devised its own mechanism to cope with it. Even the char land was reclaimed. This area did not have to wait the arrival of Islam for the introduction of settled agriculture or to learn the techniques of coping with fluvial volatility. This is a very important point and a very important argument. This is, I think, should be considered the core of this paper. Let me just point it out here. This is where Eaton gets it wrong. Oh, netizen, that's a chor in Bengali. I see. That's what I'm wondering. What's this char? Char. Okay, thank you, thank you. Finally, this copper plate provides another important inference, which is the population of this area suffered from fluvial volatility, but it devised its own mechanism to cope with it. Even the chor land was reclaimed. Chor means that bit of a dried up land in between rivers or in the middle of even the sea every now and then, of course, near the beach. Even the chor land was reclaimed. This area did not have to await the arrival of Islam for the introduction of settled agriculture or to learn the techniques of coping with fluvial volatility. Excuse me. Excuse me. Nino, good question. I'm still wondering. Keep these questions in mind. He's coming on our podcast tomorrow. We'll ask him about this. This will be, I think, the main focus of our discussion of our podcast tomorrow. Tomorrow at 7:30. Okay. I have not announced it as of yet, but verbally he has confirmed. The political pattern in the Surma Valley on the death of Bhaskar Varman is unclear. A powerful, semi-independent Samanta or feudatory or vassal stratum emerged. Shamanto, Shoinno Shamanto, owing nominal allegiance to the paramount ruler of Samatata, who was known as Samatateshwara, Shamatoteshwar. This Samanta stratum, to consolidate and expand its resource base or legitimacy, or as an act of sheer devotion, patronized Brahminical temples and institutions by granting land by means of copper plates. We have two examples of this type: the Tipera copper plate of Samanta Lokanatha and the Kalapur copper plate of Samanta Madundanatha. The seals attached to both copper plates are remarkably similar and refer to Kumara Mathyadhikarana. Okay, so Kumar Amatyadhikarana. Okay, Kumar Amatya his Adhikarana. The seals attached to both copper plates are remarkably similar and refer to Kumaramathyadhikarana. In the next line, they record the name of the individual donors, Lokanatha and Madundanatha, respectively. I wonder where their descendants are today. What would be their caste? They would still be Brahmins, probably. DC Sarkar has rightly opined that these seals actually belong to the Adhikarana, that is, office of the Board of Administrators, attached to the Kumaramatya, that is, the administrative officer Amatya, who was enjoying the status of a prince of royal blood. So a young IAS Babu from a political family, if he becomes an IAS Babu. And that's a bad example, really. Who was usually the ruler of a Vishaya district or its subdivision. The names Lokanatha and Madundanatha were written on the seals, apparently to indicate that they had countersigned the original document afterwards, incised on the copper plates, and the importance given to them would suggest that they had risen to semi-independent status. These semi-independent rulers patronized Brahminical temples with land grants, but the land happened to be forested tracts. Thus, the Tipera copper plate refers to Sarman, an Orthodox Brahmin. Pradosha Sarman, who has caused the construction of a temple of Bhagavata Ananta Narayana in a thickly forested portion in the Vishaya or the district of Suvanga or Suvanga, Gudbanga. Some more Brahmins have settled in the same area and were probably attached to this temple. This copper plate claims that the forested tract where this temple was constructed had no differentiation between quote unquote natural and artificial. Krita Akrita Avirodhi Atavi Bhukhande. It had a thick network of bush and creepers and was infested with wild animals, deer, buffaloes, boars, tigers, serpents, etc., who enjoyed, according to their will, all pleasures of home life. Pradosha Sarman approached Loknatha through a messenger whose name was Rajaputra Lakshminatha. The messenger was called Dutaka. Oh, okay. In Bengali, Dutok. Okay, so the shorter version of it is today Dut, Rajdut. In that sense, Dutaka, a messenger. Okay, I guess so. This is a Sanskrit word only. Bengali is so close to Sanskrit even today, man. Dutaka Rajputra Lakshminatha for the grant of some land for the perpetual maintenance of Ashtapushpika, Bali, Charu, Satra to the temple of Bhagavata Ananta Narayana, as well as for the maintenance of a community of Brahmins attached to this temple. Lokanatha granted land in the forest region through this copper plate. The setting up of a temple in a forested region continues the trend seen in some of the Damodarapura copper plates of the Gupta period in Birendra, in which common persons take their own initiative in constructing temples in forested tracts. Only later do they approach the state, which grants some khila, uncultivated land, on the payment of sum of money to the state exchequer. Wow. Interesting. Common persons take their own initiative in constructing temples in forested tracts. Later they approach the state, which grants some uncultivated land on the payment of a sum of money on the payment of a sum of money to the state exchequer. Okay, interesting. Pretty self-dependent. This is nice. We are not sure if Pradosha Sraman. Okay, I think that is the proper Ucharan. Pradosh Sraman in Bengali. Pradosha Sraman. Pradosha Sraman made such a payment. We are not sure if Pradosha Sraman made such a payment. This might not have been required in the much more densely forested landscape of the Surma Valley. But it is clear that before any endowment by any political elite, he has ventured into this forested tract on his own initiative. Aha, liberty. The same is true for the community of Brahmins who were probably attached to this temple. Political elites entered into the scene only later. Holy shit. The distinctly non-Sanskritic name of the Vishaya, which is the Suvanga. Okay, so this is not Suvanga. This is not good Bengal. Okay, so this is a non-Sanskritic name. Lol. I Sanskritized the non-Sanskritic word. Lol. The distinctly non-Sanskritic name of the Vishaya, which is Suvanga or Suvunga or Suvunga. Yeah, there's two V's for a reason. So Suvunga, in which land was granted, might suggest that it was located on the remote frontiers, probably in a tribal region. But it's hard to concede that Suvunga has nothing to do with the word or name Vanga later on. Most probably it was in the Suvang area of Kachar district of today's southern Assam. Despite its location in a tribal area, elements associated with the Janapada society have entered into this Aranya. This forested region was bordered on the south by the limit lines of two villages, Panga and Vapika. On the north, it was bounded by the tank or Pushkarini of Mahatta Rana Shubha, The word Mahattara generally refers to the upper strata of the peasantry. Again, a Bengali word today, Mahottar. Richard Eaton conveniently begins the book called Rise of Islam and the Bengal Frontier. Book or paper, I forgot. I think this is the paper we discussed, right? By randomly picking some lines from this inscription and inserting some words. Eaton writes, the Sylhet region of East Bengal was outside the pale of human habitation, where there is no distinction between natural and artificial, infested by wild animals and poisonous reptiles and covered with forest outgrowth. End quote. He seems to attempt to construct a thesis that this was the case in the whole of pre-Muslim Eastern Bengal, which was later won by Islam through the plough. We should remember two things. This copper plate is not concerned with Sylhet as such, but most probably with Kachar, where this land grant was made. And even a cursory reading shows that the area, despite the heavily forested landscape, was not outside the pale of human habitation. His basic premise is not true even for Kachar or Sylhet. Leave aside all Eastern Bengal. Okay. Wow. Even when he chooses to generalize the Kachar experience for the entire Eastern Bengal, he overlooks the fact that a Brahmin had already constructed a temple there. A community of Brahmins had already settled there. A military chief was already there to patronize them. Fuck. This forested tract was not far from them, at least two settled villages, and at least one Mahattara with his tank, meaning Pushkarini, a pond basically, was already present in the neighborhood. This was happening in the Kachar area at least 600 years before the arrival of Islam. Neither Sylhet nor Kachar had any need to learn the use of the plough from Islam. Oh. Well then, so far then it makes the case for caste system being prevalent then. Let's see where this goes. And it will be a fun discussion with him when he comes on our podcast tomorrow. Rishi saying, Dada is Hindutwadi Brahminical. Sanskrita is every language. Shit. Tribal word ko Sanskritize kar diya. Samrat Alakashendra. So this was happening in the Kachar area at least 600 years before the arrival of Islam. Neither Sylhet nor Kachar had any need to learn the use of the plough from Islam. So Islam could not be the religion of the plough here. If this is the situation in the most forested part of Bengal and the adjoining portions of southern Assam, it will be incorrect to suggest that Islam could be the religion of the plough in any other part of Bengal. Right. So if Islam was not the religion of the plough in the most forested part of Bengal, how was it going to be a religion of the plough in the adjoining portions of southern Assam or in any other part of Bengal? If it wasn't so in the adjoining portions of southern Assam, which was already ploughed anyway, or more fertile or easier to live. Even in the Kachar area, local society has devised its own mechanism to tame the jungle. In this process, the temples played an important role in bringing the elements of Aranya into the ambit of Janapada. Wow. अरे ये academics को कोई भाई podcast Jaipur Dialogues में नहीं बुलाता है काहे? This role of temples is apparent also in the Kalapur copper plate of Samanta Marundanatha, second half of the 7th century AD. 7th century CE. As it is highly corroded, resulting in the loss of vital data, this copper plate has been deciphered only partially by Gupta. Gupta estimates that this copper plate contained 46 to 48 lines, out of which only 24 have survived. Vital portions in the beginning and end are not available, and even the middle portion was only partially decipherable. Sarkar, another historian, based his analysis on Gupta's reading, as neither this copper plate nor its impression was available to him. This grant of this copper plate seems to have been made at the request of a Brahmin, Jayasvamin. What would be the Bengali uchcharan for this? Joyoshamin. I don't know. Joyoshami, I guess. Brahmin Jayasvamin, who had earlier received one Pataka of Jalatavi, marshy and forested land. Patak, Jalatavi. These words I don't think survive in the Bengali language today. Rutvik is saying, counterpoint, when they say religion of the plough, they actually mean religion of slash and burn mass agriculture. Right, Rutvik. That's the point Nina was also bringing up. Do join tomorrow's 7:30 podcast with this professor. Abhay, do you look forward to reading any archaeological works? Yes, papers, so definitely. Books, I don't have too many on archaeology, except the Bibi Lal books that I had discussed for a while. Not books, one book. So, Brahmin Jayaswamin, who had earlier received one pataka of Jalatavi land, and built a temple and installed an image of Bhagavat Ananta Narayana. The Jalatavi land grant in the present chapter appears to be meant for the preservation of Bali, Chadu, and Satra in the temple, and also for the maintenance of certain Traividya Brahmins. The location of the donated land has satisfactorily been identified in the Srimangala police station area of the Sylhet district on the borders of the Tripura hills. Wow. Fuck. It survives to this day. Remember this place, Srimangala police station area of the Sylhet district on the borders of the Tripura hills. Here too, a Brahmin penetrated into the forest on his own initiative. How is this possible? Got a temple constructed and installed an image. So was a Brahmin being accompanied by some lathi wielding, sword wielding people? Because even to clear out the forest, to build the forest, the Brahmin is not going to do it on his own. He has to kill so many snakes and stuff around him. How is this happening with a Brahmin? I'll have to ask these questions to him tomorrow. Political elites entered the scene only later. So they were sort of the pioneers, the pioneering spirit of India, as is the case in USA. The early settlers on the western frontiers, the wild west, they were called the pioneers because they were asked to just go randomly settle anywhere you can. जहां तक तुम पहुंचोगे वही का नाम दे देंगे यूएसए, क्योंकि यूएसए नाम से ही था. उसका यूएसए का साइज वगैरह सब बाद में बढ़ते रहा. तो USA became USA, the size of USA became the size of USA as it is today because of those pioneers, those settlers. And then the political scenario, those colonies were set up, people stayed there, cleared out forests and built up their colonies, cities emerged, then political systems reached there. The Tipera and Kalapur copper plates prove beyond doubt that Brahminical institutions were one of the pioneers. Oh, this is just what I said. Holy shit. Were one of the pioneers in advancing agrarian and cultural frontiers in the forested tracts of the Sylhet district, as well as in the adjoining districts of Assam and Tripura. Let's see some comments. I'll just give my voice a little break and have some coffee. Oh, but archaeology has to be read in a context. Without context, it becomes almost very easily misusable. I don't doubt it these days when they say Muslims made India rich. They turned the entire region into a plantation, while ancient India was about quality balanced with sustainable agriculture. Yeah, coffee, Colombian brew. We need more discussion on research paper instead of just books. Yes. Okay, let's continue. Very interesting claim here. So then we move on. Janapada Nivesha, centering on temples and mathas. Understanding religious and socio-economic dynamics in the 10th century. This is where it's going to get even more juicy. Janapad Nivesh. We have seen the role of temples and Brahminical settlements in hastening agrarian expansion and detribalization in the Surma Valley during the 6th and 7th centuries. Detribalization, guys, meaning therefore they are no longer casteless. They are into the Chaturvarna system, okay? Similar inferences are discernible in the Pashchim Bhaga. By the way, this to Max Weber even talks about. The tribal societies, uske andar to ek inevitable status difference hoga hi. It's not going to be completely equal ever in any society. Even though they may have let's say, public ownership of all things tribal. But even then, the people in different, let's say, not really professions, but the different jobs that any bunch of people had in a tribe were translated to the caste that they would have been if they were in the Hindu fold or Chaturvarna fold to begin with, when they joined the Chaturvarna fold. So their the shamanic worshippers and all, they were the ones who became Brahmins. So we have seen the role of temples and Brahminical settlements in hastening agrarian expansion and detribalization in the Surma Valley during the 6th and 7th centuries CE. Similar inferences are discernible in the Paschim Bhaga copper plate of Sri Chandra of 930 CE. To understand its significance, we should look briefly into the political history of the Chandra dynasty of Eastern Bengal, 900 to 1040 CE. Originally, they seem to be subordinate to the rulers of Harikela. Troilokya Chandra, 905 to 925 CE, has initially been described as the mainstay of the royal fortune of the king of Harikela. Oh. So he was at first an important vassal of the Harikela king, but later established his independent rule. Troilokya Chandra later conquered Chandradweep, or the Bakla Sandweep area near the mouth of the Meghna, the Moinamoti Dev Parbot area, and probably expanded in some parts of Vanga. Under Sri Chandra, 925 to 975 CE, we see a significant expansion of Chandra power. His kingdom definitely included the Dhaka Faridpur area, Sylhet, Komilla, Noakhali, parts of Tripura, the Chittagong coast, and probably the Kachar area for some. Holy shit, that's a pretty big area to govern. In a realm of such socioeconomic and cultural diversity, exactly, including many ecozones, the Chandras issued a number of copperplate inscriptions recording land grants to different kinds of donis. They also shifted their capital to Vikrampura near Dhaka Vikrampur, rather than a hill fort like Deva Parvata, which was more suited to the administrative center of local powers like the Khadgas, 650 to 700 CE, and the Rathas, 700 to 750 CE. Rath. What's this Bengali pronunciation supposed to be? They opted for more centrally located Bikrampur, from where they could control wider areas of Bengal. This is a brief sketch of the historical context of the Paschim Bhaga copper plate. It was discovered at Paschim Bhaga, a village in the Malviv Bazar subdivision of the Sylhet district. Its theatre is thus largely the same as that of Nidhanpura copper plate, making it an important document to analyze the transitions taking place in this area in a span of some 300 years. Both are concerned with the state-sponsored colonization of a forested tract through the donation of a large tract of land to a congregation of Brahmins and Brahminical religious institutions in a largely non-Sanskritic area. In the case of the Paschim Bhaga copper plate, we have a case of virtual state-sponsored Janapada Nivesha, colonization, Janapad Nivesh, centering upon temples, mathas, and a huge congregation of 6,000 Brahmins. This copper plate is concerned with the donation of 3 Vishayas, districts, the Gadala, Pogara, and Chandrapura. Godol, Pogar, Chandrapur. Together with the tract called Avedika, no shit bro, attached to Satala Varga within the Srihatta Mandala of Punravardhana Bhukti. K.K. Gupta, with his deep knowledge of local geography, has calculated that the donated tract was not less than 1,000 square kilometers in area, covering a large section of the southern portions of the modern Sylhet district. These 3 Vishayas were bounded in the east by the embankment at Vrihat Kota, or Big Fort, Brihat Kot. In the south by Mani Nadi in the Mani River, I guess, Mani Nadi. In the west by a canal or a Khataka called Jujju, another tribal name, or non-Sanskritic name, and the river Vetra Ghangi, Betroghongi, and by Koshiara Nodi, the modern Kushiara River, right, in the north. The entire tract was granted by the king on the principle of Vumichidra Nyaya, or also known as Bhumichidra Nyayana, which may indicate that a virgin space was being brought under cultivation. It was granted as a permanent gift with many immunities and privileges in favor of the gods Brahma, Vaishvanara, that Vaishanor, that is Agni, Yogeshwara, probably an aspect of Shiva, Mahakala, an aspect of Shiva, and to a congregation of 6,000 Brahmins. So you see, a few days back, Mysterious Sociologist did a podcast with Navavimarsha, our friend channel, our competitors who are taking away our jabs, did a Bengali podcast discussing when Bengalis came from outside Bengal. Okay, so all these, especially Brahmin Bengalis, are mostly outsiders. So today they have no right to say that go away Agarwals and Pandes. This tract of land was granted to increase the merit and fame of the donor and his parents in the name of the Buddha. This land was to exclude the land held by a Buddhist establishment, Ratnatraya, and the land measuring 52 patakas of 10 drona each, which was attached to the boat station of a certain Indreshwara. For some earlier analysis, read this and this. The drona or dronavapa seems to have been originally equal to about 5 bighas or roughly 1.5 acres of land. In the context of the Pashchim Bhaga copper plate of Sri Chandra, Sarkar calculates that one pataka was not less than 15 acres. So this tract of land was granted to this is where now it gets more juicy. This tract of land, okay, it was granted as a permanent gift with many immunities and privileges in favor of the gods Brahma, Vaishvanara, Yogeshwara, and to a congregation of 6,000 Brahmins. This tract of land was granted to increase the merit and fame of the donor and his parents. Yes, obviously. And in the name of the Buddha. This land was to exclude the land held by a Buddhist establishment and the land measuring 52 patakas of 10 drona each, which was attached to the boat station of a certain Indreshwara. The area within the same boundaries were transformed into a Brahmapura or Brahmin settlement and given the name Sri Chandrapura, undoubtedly after the name of the king. In verse 22, it is stated that a Vaishnava Brahmin, Vinayaka, of a Vinayaka, kahan suna hai ye naam humne, humko kyun ye naam pasand hai. By the way, Savarkar has a book called Vinayaka and Vainayaka. That's very fun stuff. So Vinayaka of it is stated that a Vaishnava Brahmin Vinayaka of a village called Kaligram was responsible for settling the 6,000 Brahmins in the Sri Chandrapura Sasana. Shashon, so sort of a rule. Sri Chandrapur Shashon. Sarkar takes it to mean that Vinayaka paid the fee to the state for converting the land allotted to the Brahmins into a rent-free holding. Such interesting socio-economic phenomena, such fascinating financial instruments. His inference is difficult to accept. Acha. As the practice of depositing a fee to the state exchequer to purchase a plot of land for some religious doni is discernible largely in the Gupta period copperplate inscriptions from Birendra, but is largely absent from other parts of Bengal in the earlier or later periods. It might not have been required in the marshy and forested landscape of the Surma Valley. In the absence of any categorical reference to the deposition of a fee by Vinayaka, we may be skeptical about Sarkar's inference. It is more plausible that Vinayaka persuaded the king to donate the tract in perpetuity. Okay. Vinayak persuaded the king to donate the tract in perpetuity. Vinayaka might have persuaded the king, but this Parama Saugata king took pride in claiming that this Brahmin settlement was planned and designed, Parikalpya, by him, so it was named after him. An active role of the king from planning the creation of this Sri Chandrapura Brahmapura to its implementation involving a major administrative restructuring, amalgamating 3 district-level localities, is more than apparent. A newly conquered area, forested, marshy, and heavily influenced by tribal cultures, was sought to be integrated to the core areas of the Chandra state through the state-sponsored planting of Brahminical religious institutions and a huge congregation of Brahmins. Barring the size of the donated tract, the single biggest donation to temples mathas and Brahmins in all Eastern India, and probably one of the biggest in all early medieval India. This generally conforms to the pattern in many other parts of the subcontinent. Patronage to Brahmins and Brahmanical religious institutions was one of the ways through which early medieval Indian states tried to integrate the peripheral areas of their state to the core areas. The Paschim Bhaga copper plate is important for other reasons also. As we shall see, a hierarchy existed among these mathas and temples, indicated by differences in the areas of tracts granted to them. Sab kuch economics pe ultimately. In the following paragraphs, we shall deal with this aspect of these mathas. तेरे पास कितना जमीन है, मेरे पास इतना जमीन है. The first block of land in Srichandrapura Brahmapura, measuring 120 patakas. Oh, patka land, yes. Patka Jomin. Right. In Bengali, this word is used today. The first block of land in Srichandrapura Brahmapura, measuring 120 patakas, was granted to the god Brahma for his temple or matha. As indicated by the subdivision of land among various donis associated with this matha, it appears to be a big religious and educational establishment. That it served as an educational institution is indicated by the provision for the grant of 10 patakas of land to a teacher, Chandra Vyakarana, and 10 patakas to a group of 10 students for Pali, subsistence, and Ghutika, chalk, probably including other necessities of this type. In Bengali, it's Ghuti today. This temple cum matha was big enough to require 15 players on various drums, 2 conch blowers, 22 servants, 8 chetikas, maid servants, 4 florists, 2 oilmen, so the telecast, 2 potters, kumbhakaras, a kayastha, a clerk, and an accountant or astrologer, ganika. All these received varying portions of land out of the 120 patakas donated to this temple cum matha. 40 patakas were earmarked for repairs and renovations, showing the importance of the complex. The copper plate also refers to a Brahmin whose name has unfortunately not been mentioned, who got 1 pataka of land, probably for building or supervising the building of the temple and the matha. So you see, different kinds of government functionaries, education, academia, bureaucracy, it's all Brahmins only. The second block of land, measuring 280 patakas, was granted in favor of the gods Vaishvanara, Agni, Yogeshwara, probably an aspect of Shiva, and Mahakala, an aspect of Shiva, and the sage Jaimini, who was deified and worshipped. These 4 were worshipped in 4 Deshantariya mathas, Deshantoriyo mot in Bengali, Deshantariya mathas, and 4 Vangala mathas, Bengal mot or Deshantor mot. So Vangala's Uchcharan in Bengali has to be Bengal. And when BJP started winning some seats in 2019 in Bengal, Bangla Pakho people, Rantak Pakho and commies started saying that Bongo ke Bengal hote deven na. Bengal ko, the Vanga ko Bengal mat banne do. Ye sab bohiragato uske uchcharan hai. The installation of the same group of 4 deities in 2 groups of 4 adjacent mathas is curious. In many aspects, these 2 groups were quite similar. In lines 42 through 47 of this copper plate, shares of attendants and other persons associated with these 2 groups have been enumerated. Both groups had same number of students, as 5 patakas are allotted for each group of 5 students in each of the 4 mathas. So they were basically, there was a free market of mathas competing with each other. Each matha had 1 teacher of the Vedas, and each teacher received 10 patakas of land. Similarly, 0.5 patakas are provided to each of the following in each of the 8 mathas: the florist, the barber, the oilman, the washerman, Rajaka or Rajak. Okay, so the Rajak surname is washerman. Rajok. Yeah, Rajok is a Bengali surname. 8 servants and cobblers, Muchi. It also appears that each group had the same number of chetikas, maid servants, and attached to the temple cum matha complex, and each chetika was given 0.75 pataka of land. The provision 0.75 pataka of land to each Chetika compared to 0.5 pataka of land to each of these mentioned above reveals that the ritual status and the importance of Chetika were above these groups. But remember who are the Chetikas? Okay, एक मिनट फिर से तुमको याद दिलाते हैं. Chetikas were maid servants. The maid servants had a higher ritual position. Dasis. Chetika. This is fascinating. Even the number of patakas earmarked for repairs and renovations was uniformly 10 for each matha. Similarly, one Mahattara Brahmana was attached to each group, yet the matha attached to the temple of Brahma appears to be the most important institution within the entire complex, receiving 40 patakas for repairs and renovations. That also indicates that it was the single biggest and probably the most important matha in the area. Despite many similarities, a fundamental difference existed between the two groups reflected in their nomenclature. One group of 4 mathas was Deshantarya, foreign or outsider, Deshantarya, Bohiragato matha, and the other was called Vangala matha. Hamesha. Same. History doesn't repeat itself, history rhymes. If both groups of mathas were affiliated to the same authority, it would not have been required to christen one Deshantarya. Yet both received equal patronage. Holy shit, this is so fascinating. This situation demands some explanation. The situation is peculiar. A king who takes pride in being a Paramasaugata, meaning a great devotee of the Buddha, Param Shaugato, Tathagata Rai's brother is Shaugato Rai in Trinamool Congress. So the king who takes pride in being a Paramasaugata donates more than 3 Vishayas in favor of a large congregation of Brahmins. 1 matha of Brahma, 4 Vangala mathas, and even 4 Deshantarya mathas, while totally ignoring a Buddhist establishment already present in the same general area. What the fuck? ये क्या अजीब complex history है भाई हमारा. Listen to this line again. How do I put this in the comment section? Wait. This is hilarious. Lol. ये पूरा comment एक part में नहीं जाएगा. The situation is peculiar. A king who takes pride in being a Paramasaugata, a great devotee of the Buddha, donates more than 3 Vishayas, meaning districts, in favor of a large congregation of Brahmins, 1 matha of Brahma, 4 Vangala mathas, and even 4 Deshantarya mathas, while totally ignoring a Buddhist establishment already present in the same general area. This Brahminical settlement was important enough to be given the very name of the king. ठीक है, ऐसा कोई रैंडम सेटलमेंट नहीं था, इतना इंपॉर्टेंट सेटलमेंट था कि वो बुद्धा का डिवोटी राजा के नाम से वो सेटलमेंट का नाम भी हुआ. Rulers of the Chandra dynasty, despite generally being Buddhist in faith, patronized Brahminical institutions and Brahmins for ritual needs. This is hilarious. Valmiki capitalists. Why? For propitiatory rites such as Adbhuta Shanti. Adbhuta Shanti क्या है? Ajib Shanti. A right, which is a right to keep away calamity from a king, an individual, or the population of land. तो वो बुद्धिस्ट है मगर ब्राह्मण्स के ये सब चीजों में उसका भरोसा है, विश्वास है. अद्भुत शांति. हम सबको अद्भुत शांति करवाना है. In early medieval Bihar and Bengal, religious boundaries were quite permeable, exactly. And this copper plate shows the same trend. Yes, fair enough. This is not a gotcha moment, really. This is just an egg on the face of today's anti-Hindu Buddhists. Does it reflect a ritual and functional failure of Buddhist monasteries on the agrarian frontiers of Sylhet? We shall explore this later. But let's get back to the issue raised above, which is the acknowledged differentiation between Deshantarya and Vangala mathas. Sarkar opined that Chandradvipa, a territory conquered by Trailokya Chandra, was also known as Vangala Desha. with, with Vangaladesha. With the expansion of Chandra power, the name Vangala gradually extended over areas of eastern Bengal. He infers that the Vangala mathas of this copper plate were run by priests of Sri Chandra's home territory of Vangala or Chandradvipa, and Deshantariya mathas and temples might have been run by priests from outside the Chandra kingdom. This is a reasonable view. In a recent analysis, it has been argued, quote, but the most important point is that in this religious complex, identical deities were propitiated in two different mathas, respectively, of the outsiders, the Deshantariya mathas, and the people of Vangala country in the Vangala mathas. There must have been sharp differences between the two communities residing in the Brahmapura. The difference should be sought outside the religious spheres, as the two groups worshipped identical deities. डिफरेंस है, स्टार्क डिफरेंसेस है, मगर कल्चरली नहीं, इन द रिलीजियस स्फीयर में नहीं, मे बी इवन द नॉन रिलीजियस कल्चरल एस्पेक्ट्स, खान पान एटसेट्रा. This is the story of India's unity, guys. This is why, even as an atheist, I have to admit this. I can't get out of my Hindu identity, therefore. It has also been argued that the sharp differences between the Deshantariya mathas and the Vangala mathas could signal their unequal access to resources. This does not appear to be the case. As we have seen, Vangala mathas and Deshantariya mathas got identical land grants with no apparent differentiation in royal patronage. Nor do we see... I didn't mean that I am atheist and even then I'm having to admit to Hindutva. I'm saying that even if I was an atheist, I would have to admit, logically speaking, in the interest of logical consistency. Because that's just what the history is. As we have seen, Vangala mathas and Deshantariya mathas got identical land grants with no apparent differentiation in royal patronage, nor do we see any trace of conflict between the two, a remarkable contrast to the two mathas in some other parts of India. The Paschim Bhaga copper plate also shows a significant absence of any deity of the Vaishnava pantheon. Sarkar has noted that since the absence of Vishnu among the deities worshipped in the area is not easy to explain, Yogeshwara here may also have been an aspect of Vishnu instead of Shiva. This argument is not convincing. Sarkar himself has pointed out elsewhere that the names of the Shaivite deities generally ended with the title Ishvara, and those of Vaishnavite deities ended with Swamin. As we have seen in the case of Vinayaka, who is referred to as Vaishnava, that Brahmin, this copper plate is categorical in recording the sectarian affiliations of persons associated with different mathas. We have nothing to suggest that the Yogeshwara mentioned in this copper plate stands for Vishnu. As a whole, the Shaiva affiliation of this religious complex is marked. It is only recently that the role of Shaiva competition in the decline of Indian Buddhism is gradually being recognized. Oh. So, recent scholarship says that it was actually Shaivism that contributed to the decline of Buddhism. No fucking wonder. Shashanka was a Shaivite. Chanakyan era mein Bengal ke Shaivite gurus and Brahmins were were getting invited to discuss with Shaiva Siddhanta people in the south as well as the Kashmiri Shaivism people. There's the famous Mahasthangarh in Bangladesh today, a legendary place of Shaivite research in the times of Chanakya. And then Pala dynasty endorses Buddhism a little more. This copper plate, okay. So, it is only recently that the role of Shaiva competition to the decline of Indian Buddhism is gradually being recognized. The Surma Valley pattern seems to conform to this trend. This copper plate proffers some interesting inferences regarding religious equations in this tract of Sylhet. As we have seen, the Paschim Bhaga copper plate mentions a Buddhist establishment, Ratnatraya, which antedated the creation of Srichandrapura Brahmapura. This establishment held some land. We have no means of knowing how much. The penetration of this Buddhist establishment in this part of Sylhet was not the result of any royal munificence. We infer this by contrasting the picture with the Raja Vihara, royal monastery, mentioned in the Gunaighar copper plate. The Gunaighar copper plate, discovered in the Gunaighar area of Komilla district, Gunaighar, never heard of this, records the donation of 11 patakas of marshy and uncultivated land to a Buddhist monastery headed by Acharya Shantideva. Holy shit. Is Acharya Shantideva Bhushuku? Bhushuku is Acharya Shantideva, right? Who wrote that Proto-Bengali poem that Bajna padi paua khale niyo gharini chandali leli bhushuku tu aj Bengali bhoili. A Raja Vihara Kshetra cultivated fields belonging to Raja Vihara Kshetra means cultivated fields belonging to the royal monastery that formed the southern boundary of the gift land. The locality in which land was granted to the monastery headed by Acharya Shantideva had other Buddhist monasteries and Brahminical temples also. But the nomenclature Rajavihara was reserved for only one monastery, as appears from the very name Rajavihara. When the foundation of any monastery was the result of direct royal patronage, that was likely to be manifested in its name. Within Samatata, examples of this sort are provided by the Bhavadeva Vihara, Ananda Vihara, etc. within the Mainamati monastic complex. In the available state of knowledge, we have no evidence of any kind of royal patronage to the Buddhist establishment mentioned in the Paschim Bhaga copper plate. It appears that this Buddhist establishment penetrated into the area on its own initiative. It appears that this Buddhist establishment penetrated into the area on its own initiative, devoid of any royal moorings. It survived due to its linkages with the local population. Within early medieval Samatata, we have many examples of this sort. So far, no copper plate recording the gift of any kind of land to any Buddhist monastery has been recorded in the Surma Valley. Yet, we see the presence of at least one Buddhist monastery in this area. What are the implications of the planting of Vangala Mathas and Deshantriya Mathas, and a huge congregation of 6,000 Brahmins to colonize a marshy and forested periphery of the state by the ruling Paramasaugata king, while totally ignoring a Buddhist establishment which was already present in the neighborhood of the granted area? Probably the area was too big to be colonized just by the Vangala Mathas, hence the need to bring Deshantriya Mathas. But it is curious that a king who claimed to be Paramasaugata did not entrust a Buddhist establishment with the state-sponsored colonization of this area, and indeed favored Brahminical institutions in this important endeavor. ये थोड़ा comment में डालने दो. Then I'll respond to Retroev's concerns here. So Retroev is saying, Dada, what if this professor suddenly claims it wasn't because of Islam Buddhism declined, but because of Shaivism? Even if he says that, first of all, see the context. This professor views our channel regularly. So is there a reason to suspect such a man in the ways you are suspecting? I know what you are insinuating. I get your concern. But secondly, even if Buddhism did decline because of Shaivism, so what? If it's history, we'll have to admit it. Especially if it's told by legit people who are well-intentioned people, well-intentioned academics and stuff. And especially if it's not on the basis of the sword, if it's on the basis of dialogue, so what? हमने कौन सा ठेका लेके रखा है बुद्धिज्म को प्रोटेक्ट करने का, या फिर बुद्धिज्म को मतलब हिस्टोरिकली प्रोटेक्ट करने का, या फिर इंसुलेट करने का फ्रॉम ऑल सॉर्ट्स ऑफ वैदिक ट्रेडिशंस? अगर शैविज्म के वजह से गड्ढे में गया तो गया, हमको क्या है, अब हम क्या करें? हिस्टोरिकल इनजस्टिस का तो चुतियापा मैं तो वैसे भी नहीं मानता हूं. लेट मी हैव अ बिट ऑफ कॉफी नाउ. We have 45 minutes to go before we start the Libertarian Party of India audience interaction, guys. Be ready for that. Be ready with your questions. It's going to be audience interaction, but not with calls, because some people speak too slowly. It wastes a lot of time. I'll be taking super chat questions, obviously, and non-super chat questions. I'll only take the ones that I find very significant and important, and we'll try to have Mr. Sociologist in it as well. I'll just be the referee here. I won't be giving too much of my views. Retro, yes, I get your concern. As all the eight discovered copper. Okay. And yeah. So this was the hilarious sentence we ended with. Again, Okay, it is curious that a king who claimed to be Paramasogata did not entrust a Buddhist establishment with the state-sponsored colonization of this area and instead favored Brahminical institutions in this important endeavor. As all the 8 discovered copper plates issued by Sri Chandra are concerned with the donation of lands to Brahmins or Brahminical institutions, one may argue that the Paschim Bhaga pattern is a manifestation of the general trend discernible in his other copper plates. Paschim Bhaga pattern is a manifestation of the general trend discernible in his other copper plates. But this may not be a correct analysis. Other known copper plates of this ruler are concerned with the donation of small tracts of agriculturally well-settled lands to individual Brahmins in the Dhaka Bikrampur and Komilla Noakhali areas, that is, which were the core areas of the Chandra state. In the case of the Paschim Bhaga copper plate, the locale was different, as was the motive, which was Janapada Nivesha in a newly conquered land and its effective integration with the core areas of the state. In a nutshell, the instrument of legitimacy for the king, that is Buddhism, was not the instrument of integration of the frontier areas of the state. This is fascinating. Holy shit. The instrument of legitimacy for the king, which was Buddhism, was not the instrument of integration of the frontier areas of the state. So Buddhism was not finding relevance among the frontiers, meaning the tribals. उसके लिए Brahminical institutions को fund करना पड़ा. And the king wanted it, even though it was not his own religion, so to speak, which was doing the job. Fuck. This is fascinating research. This stands in marked contrast with some examples of early historic India. In the case of early historic Deccan, we see that the Satavahana rulers who claimed Eko Brahmana, the foremost important Brahmin status for themselves, relied on the Buddhist monasteries for agrarian expansion, integration of the turbulent tribal frontiers, and detribalization. In the Paschim Bhaga copper plate, the pattern was just the reverse. A ruler who claimed Paramasogata status could not trust the integrative capacity of the Buddhist monasteries. If early historic Deccan may appear to be... So you see, there's a beautiful collaboration between Hinduism and Buddhism in this case. In Deccan mein, Buddhism does the good job of integrating the entire society into one culture, and in Bengal, Hinduism does the job. तो हमको कोई शत्रुता काहे होगा बुद्धिज्म से, unless कोई पागल चुतिया है. So Paramasogata could not trust the integrative capacity of the Buddhist monasteries. If early historic Deccan may appear to be too removed in time and space from early 10th century Sylhet, Pagan Burma may provide a closer contrast, where the Buddhist Sangha provided the institutional nucleus for agrarian expansion, creation and management of hydraulic resources, detribalization, and integration of turbulent tribal frontiers into the body politic of the pagan state. Is this pagan state? Pagan state. This was happening in the same centuries when Buddhism lagged behind in institutional collaboration with the state in Samatata in these processes. That was the pagan state was in the Deccan. Recently, it has been argued that Buddhism was unable to compete with Brahminism because it could not provide practical services to the early medieval Indian states in the matters of statecraft. As mentioned by Johannes Bronkhorst, a sociologist or anthropologist that, I think historical sociologist or historical anthropologist that mysterious sociologist regularly looks up to. Here we find Buddhism lagging behind in the colonization, right? Here we find Buddhism lagging behind in the colonization of the marshy and forested periphery of the state. So it should not be surprising to see a peculiar feature, which is early Chandras of Bengal were Buddhists, but later Chandras were probably not. Before we proceed to analyze the developments in the next century, one more trend shown by the Paschim Bhaga copper plate needs to be highlighted. An increasing pressure on land. In this copper plate, one pataka was composed of 10 dronas. This is a marked departure from the Gunaighar copper plate and Kalapur copper plate. In both plates, one pataka was composed of 40 dronas. The Paschim Bhaga copper plate indicates an increasing pressure on land as the pataka drona ratio has been reduced to 1:10. A significant transformation of the land has taken place. So it should not come as any surprise if we see the evolution of a local state in the same general area in the next century. Changes by the 11th century. Local state formation, some related socio-economic process, and patronage to Brahminical temples and cults by the state. That a significant transformation of the land has taken place by the middle of the 11th century is reflected in another copper plate inscription from Sylhet district. The Bhatera copper plate inscription of Govinda Keshavadeva of 1049 CE. It was discovered at Bhatera, about 20 miles from Sylhet, 5 miles south of where the East Bengal Railway crosses the Kushiara River. The police situation in the political situation in the Surma Valley after Sri Chandra is not clear. Around 1049 CE, we see the issue of the Bhatera copper plate by Govinda Keshavadeva. It records the donation of 375 hala, plowshare, hal, 375 hal of land along with 296 houses or households in various villages, Nana Grame, a Bengali word to this date, Nana Grame, to various villages, to Shiva, that is to a temple of Shiva, along with different kinds of attendants belonging to quote-unquote subject races. Subject races. So I guess tribals. The absence of any epithet like Maharaja, Dhiraja, etc. For either for Govinda Keshavadeva or for any of his ancestors forces us to question the forces us to question the independent status of this dynasty. Right. It therefore might have been just a vassal. Nor does the copper plate contain any royal seal. The customary practice of addressing different officials at the time of issue is also absent. The customary practice of addressing different officials at the time of issue is also absent. And the plate is rather silent on the administrative structure of the state. It appears that the state which Govinda Keshavadeva forged was at an early stage of institutionalization. But Srihatta or Sylhet, instead of being just one mandala, that is Srihatta Mandala, within Pundravardhana Bhukti, has emerged as a separate political unit as a state. This copper plate refers to Sriharajya, which is apparently an abbreviation of Srihatta Rajya. तब भी short form मारते थे लोग. Srihatta Rajya को short से Sriharajya बना दिया. Govinda Keshavadeva is described as Srihattanatha. Oh, Srihattanath. Here we are witnessing the formation of a local state without much bureaucratic paraphernalia. Pre-Doge. क्या बात है? ये तो मार्क करना पड़ेगा. Thank you, Shaik, for becoming a member. Here we are witnessing the formation of a local state without much bureaucratic paraphernalia, whose ruler grants a large tract of land to a temple of Shiva, ostensibly for the merit of his parents and himself, as well as for the legitimacy of his rule. His rule extended over at least some portions of Sylhet district, parts of today's Hailakandi and Kachar districts, and parts of northern Tripura. It thus included some areas which have retained their tribal character till a recent past. This is reflected in the language of this copper plate. The first 29 lines are in Sanskrit. Lines 29 through 51 are in a local Bengali dialect, whereas lines 52 through 55 are in an unknown tribal language, probably Kuki. Thus, parts of it were addressed to some tribal audience in an attempt to negotiate the tribal substrata of the area. However, a transformation seems to have taken place in the area since the days of the Tipera and Kalapur copper plates, in which the forested nature of the landscape was the most marked feature. Okay, it's no longer forested, and forested nature of the landscape no longer exists. Instead of the donation of Atavi Bhukhanda, forest land, as in the Tipera copper plate, or Jalatavi Bhukhanda, the marshy forested land, as in the Kalapur copper plate, or an unspecified category of land apparently brought under cultivation for the first time, as in the case of Nidhanpura and Paschim Bhaga copper plates, The land granted in this copper plate is measured in terms of hala or hala. This land abutted with houses and spread across many villages, nana grame, Bengali word. In other words, the temple was granted land along with attendant labor. This was in a swampy area adjoining tribal land. Yet, plough culture has become so common that land is measured in terms of ploughshares, even in the most forested and marshiest part of Bengal. The transactional network of this temple, as indicated by the two spread, the transactional network of this temple, as indicated by the spread of the gift land across a wide area, seems to be widespread. It got 2 halas of land at Katakhal in Bengali, identified with a locality of the same name in the Hailakandi subdivision of Kachar district, 10 halas of Salachapara areas of Kachar district, and many halas along with quote-unquote houses in the areas of adjoining Bhatera or Bhatera. It was also granted 10 halas to the west of Sagara. The translator of this copper plate has rightly equated this with Haur, a local pronunciation of Sagara, referring to the sea-like swamps. Oh. However, even in these deep marshes, some varieties of Bodo rice, a species specific to the marshy areas of Bengal, not Bodo rice, it's Bodo rice, Bodo chal, I guess, grew plentifully. Here we have probably the first recorded evidence of successful negotiation of this swampy landscape. Howrah, वहां से हावड़ा आया, हावड़ा. In Samatota, right from the days of the Gunaighar copper plate of 507 CE, marshy land was granted to Buddhist or Brahminical religious institutions. Yet there is no parallel to this grant of land along with houses in a marshy landscape in all South Asia. A distant parallel is provided by a similar practice in Angkor period Cambodia. There, whenever a new area was conquered by the king, he tried to bring it under his effective control by planting temples or bringing the existing temples under the network of the imperial temple of the capital city. If new temples were planted by the state in the newly conquered area, they were generally granted marshy lands and attendant slave labor. With the help of the slave labor, the temple had to bring the marshy and forested areas under cultivation. This created a new resource base for the state in the long run. In Bhatera copper plate, the temple of Shiva was granted houses rather than slave labor. That is, members of specified households in the granted villages were required to contribute labor to the temple. This was essential for its survival in a sparsely populated area. One important differentiation is also discernible. It is also in Sylhet district, especially around Bhatera, that we find references to the grant of quote-unquote houses along with some halas of land to the temple. In Kachar district or in the areas of Hill Tipera, only some halas of land were granted, not houses. Probably these areas were not settled enough for a grant of household labor to the temple. Here, the temple had to play a more active role on the agrarian frontiers and devise ways to interact with the tribal substrata. सब कुछ temple ही कर रहा है. This gives significance to the fact that some lines in this copper plate were written in a tribal language, obviously addressed to a tribal audience. No wonder today's Babu's offices, district magistrate offices are frequented by people who treat those Babus as gods or respected Purohits of ancient years. The institutions are similar. We should also note the total absence of any indication of Buddhist presence in the tracts granted to this temple. Okay? Absence of any indication of Buddhist presence in the tracts granted to this temple. In some other parts of early medieval Bihar and Bengal, we see that Buddhist institutions were present on agrarian frontiers and played an important role in detribalization. This does not appear to be the case in the Bhatera copper plate. Some other parts of early medieval Bihar and Bengal did get help from Buddhism on this topic, but not in the case of the Bhatera copper plate. We have seen that the land granted to the temple was spread across many villages, and no Buddhist presence of any kind is referred to, even indirectly. This may indicate a gradual decline of Buddhism in the area. The resource mobilization capacity of Govinda Keshava Deva, as well as his patronage to Brahmins and Brahminical temples, seems to have increased in the later part of his reign. Thus, in the second Bhatera copper plate, issued by his successor Ishana Deva, it is claimed that Govinda Keshava Deva undertook the rite of Tula Purusadana, Tula Purusadana, donating gold to a Brahmin or a group of Brahmins equal to the weight of the donor. Tula Purushdan. For this nascent state, this ritual must have involved a considerable mobilization of resources. Interesting. So the resource mobilization capacity of Govinda Keshava Deva, as well as his patronage to Brahmins and Brahminical temples, seems to have increased in the later part of his reign. Thus, in the second Bhatera copper plate issued by his successor Ishana Deva, it is claimed that Govinda Keshava Deva undertook the rite of Tula Purusadana, which is donating gold to a Brahmin or a group of Brahmins equal to the weight of the donor. For this nascent state, this ritual must have involved a considerable mobilization of resources. We are also informed that by his Tula Purushadana, the Brahmins got so much wealth that they were covered with gold and jewels. So Govinda Keshava Deva, I guess, was pretty fat. And Govinda Keshava Deva became like a wish-fulfilling tree for them, and fully satisfied, they lost the desire to go back to the places of their origins. Yes, obviously. We are also informed that he constructed a lofty stone temple for Krishna. Leaving aside the usual amount of panegyric in this claim, we may visualize that inviting Brahmins and settling them in this nascent state and patronage to Brahminical temples were among the measures through which he tried to legitimate and consolidate his rule. Obviously. Legitimacy देने का काम है Brahmins का. These acts of munificence must have taken place in the later part of his rule, as they are not mentioned in the first Bhatera copper plate. Under Ishana Deva, as reflected in the second Bhatera plate, this state came to have an increased administrative apparatus. Thus, the Akshapatalika, accountant general, whose name was Vanamalikara, who belonged to the Vaidya caste, received 2 halas of land. So you see, Brahmins, Boidos and Kaisthos to this date in Kolkata or even Bengal maintain their privileges. Ashtopatalika. Aksa Patalika. How would the Bengali pronunciation would be? Aksa. Akhopatalika. And the Vaidya castes, Vaidya is supposed to be a doctor, but they were doing government stuff as well. Bonomalikar, yes. Vanamalikara, who belonged to the Vaidya caste, received 2 halas of land. This copper plate also refers to one Veeradatta, the military commander. Aha, kya obvious name hai, Veeradatta, the military commander. These officers, nothing was left to imagination. These officers of the state are absent from the first Bhatera plate. Oh, Ishana Deva also constructed a temple for Vishnu. Summing up the Surma Valley experience and its historiographical implications, guys. Let me take a bit of coffee and a sip of other things before I get to the conclusion of this paper. I'm very honored to find so many viewers in the discussion of such esoteric and dense research papers from the most elite institutions and the most qualified scholars and professors, historians, all, not just historians, of course, but this is fascinating. I don't think if I had not started this, no one would even believe that such a thing is possible. I guess only तो हर कॉलेज यूनिवर्सिटी का तो एक ऑनलाइन कभी कभी सेमिनार्स होता ही है पेपर वेपर डिस्कस करके, but a random guy discussing it would have viewers from so many random professions and fields, people of all ages and qualifications. That I think is very fascinating, and no one would have believed me if I had told them this would happen before starting this channel. Because all these papers are pretty dense and advanced to listen to. Reading it is only so tough, so listening to is even more tough and rigorous. We have seen that this marshiest and most forested area in Bengal was a peripheral part of the state of Samatata and Kamarupa in the initial phases of this period at least. By the last phase, it witnessed the evolution of a local state, which could not have occurred without a fundamental transformation of a significant portion of the land from Aranya to Janapada. The early medieval Surma Valley offers a picture of an expanding economy and society characterized by continuous settlement expansion in which Brahminical institutions, meaning temples and mathas, had a great role. Some were planted by the state in the forested and tribal areas. Others penetrated these areas on their own initiative, establishing intricate linkages with the society in which they functioned. Yes, as even corroborated by Max Weber in his book Religion of India, which we will pretty soon resume from our live streams, and catered to some of their needs. In such cases, the state centered into the... So you see, this is the job that CPIM used to do, and I think does even to this date, to maintain their political power. This is the job that RSS does in other places. Fuck. So you see that the name Brahmins means so many things in today's context. Listen to this sentence. Okay. Some were planted by the state in the forested and tribal areas. Others penetrated these areas on their own initiative, establishing intricate linkages with the society in which they functioned and catered to some of their needs. Doesn't it sound familiar? In such cases, the state entered into the scene to patronize them only later, probably to use their linkages with the society for its own advantage. Buddhist institutions were present, but according to available data, without any state patronage. This appears strange, as most of the ruling dynasties of early medieval Samatata Harikela were Buddhists, and their kings took pride in styling themselves as Paramasaugata. Buddhist monasteries failed to enter into institutional collaboration with the state in integrating this forested and marshy periphery. By the end of this phase, we have some indirect indication of spatial contradiction of Buddhism in this area. As a whole, Brahminical institutions were more active on the agrarian and tribal frontiers of the Surma Valley. So, like CPM of later years. Long before the arrival of Islam in this most forested and marshiest part of eastern Bengal, the local society had devised its own mechanism to tame the jungle, integrate the tribal population into the ambit of Brahminism or Buddhism, cope with fluvial volatility, and cultivate rice through plough agriculture, even in the marshy areas. These developments force us to question those historiographical models which explain the Islamization of eastern Bengal in terms of Islam being the quote-unquote religion of the plough and the quote-unquote harbinger of rice evolution. Wow. Let's see the acknowledgements just for fun's sake. Just because we still have 20 minutes to go before the Libertarian Party live stream starts. Most of the arguments of this article evolved during my tenure at Assam Central University, Silchar, 2004 to 2008, where I had an opportunity to understand some aspects of the geographical peculiarities and historical complexities of the Barak Valley area, Kachar. This would not have been possible without the help and support of Professor Shojol Nag. Later in 2010, an earlier draft of this paper was read at an international conference on environmental history and politics with particular reference to northeastern India, organized by the Department of History, Assam Central University, Silchar. I thank Professor Shojol Nag for inviting me to this conference. Thanks are also due to the anonymous referees for their comments. I take responsibility for the shortcomings of this article. This was good stuff. This is fascinating stuff. And we will have some queries and questions that have arisen in our minds, which we will take up with him tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Let me check some comments now. Then I'll go offline at 7:15 p.m. and come back at 7:30, guys. Bro, this is very cool, not dense at all. For some people, it is. It is not that dense for me anymore because of having gone through Nietzsche, Sri Aurobindo, Declan Quigley, Nicholas Dirks. वो सब पढ़ लेने के बाद कुछ भी और dense नहीं लगता है. मगर जो लोगों का इंग्लिश में उतना grasp नहीं है और फिर वो थोड़ा academic rigor भी नहीं है, ऐसे ही cool लग रहा था इसलिए चैनल फॉलो कर लिए, अब थोड़ा बहुत इंटरेस्ट आ गया है, उसके लिए उन लोगों के लिए भी काफी डेंस है ये सब। और वैसे तुम तो भाई मेडिकल के बंदे हो, तुम्हारा क्या है, तुम तो पढ़ पढ़ के पूरा जिंदगी बिता लिए। हम खेलकूद वालों के लिए भी थोड़ा सोचो, प्रिविलेज भोसड़ी के। मोस्ट एरिया ऑफ बंगाल वाज जंगल, नो एग्रीकल्चर एंड विलेज। No, that was the topic of the paper. Okay, it was mostly Aranya. It was turned to Janapadas with the help of Brahmins, because of Brahmins, and they were the pioneers of the land. A big fan from Holdia, Shoham Maiti. Thank you, Shoham. Holdia, the place near Tamralipti of ancient eras, and our Shubhendu Adhikari. Shaki Singh, hello Dada, any critique of Marx's ideas on leftism, CPM, woke ideologies is met with the age-old dictum that real communism अब देखो रियल कम्युनिज्म तो ट्राई होगा तमिलनाडु में, देखो कैसे सैमसंग को निकालता है वहां से। This is mirrored in ancient times with rishis living in Naimisharanya, Khandavavana and Dandakaranya. Yes. Internet brings together people of like minds. Yes. I like the parts where you pause reading and explain. Yes. Aksha Patalika, baapre. I see. Howrah se Howrah aaya kya? This we'll have to ask tomorrow the professor if we remember. Are Vedas had timekeeping, weather apps and astronomic books. Yes, this to even Irfan Habib said. Hamare favorite historian aaj ke din mein. Irfan Habib said ke Brahmins ka respect was predicated on the fact that they had knowledge of calendars. So everyone had to talk to them, respect them, and get knowledge from them. Brahmins knew timekeeping and agriculture. Yes, corroborated by the great Irfan Habib. I was reading Thomas Sowell yesterday. He quoted Nehru and criticized his stance on profits. Yes. Which book? Brahmin supremacy established. Lol. Only my vision of communism is the best, and the rest will follow. Adi Shankara did it. Yes. The spread of Shaivism may have led to the decline of Buddhism. We'll have to ask these questions to him. Note these down. Oh, you are reading basic economics. আচ্ছা বুদ্ধিস্টদের কেউ আরে ভাই মতই ট্রিট করে নো লেস নো লেস সিভিরিটি অফ কোর্স me no speak no English. Okay then, thank you guys for joining. See you in 15 minutes with your questions, live interactions. Bye bye. How to end the stream? Oh yeah.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো